Israel widens its offensive and expands its targets as it enters day 5 in a battle against Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip. A short time ago, Gaza medical officials say an Israeli missile flattened a house in a residential neighborhood, killing at least 11 civilians, including several children. The international community is trying to broker a ceasefire, even as concern grows that Israel and Hamas are closing in on an all-out war. I'm Shannon Breen. We begin hour number 2 of America's News Headquarters with the Israeli ambassador to the U.S., Michael Oren. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming in today.
Good to be here, Sharon, with you.
All right. How do you respond to these concerns that are consistently raised on both sides of the issue, that where this is happening is not in a traditional battleground? I mean, there are civilians who are going to be involved on both sides.
Well, first of all, Shannon, let's keep in mind we have 5.5 million Israelis under shell fire right now as we're talking. On the way up here to Fox, the sirens are going off in Tel Aviv. And that's almost close to 3/4 of our entire population is either in a bomb shelter right now or within a 15-second run from the nearest bomb shelter, because that's how long you have before the bomb hits. Now, the huge difference between us and Hamas, a terrorist organization, is that they're using their civilian population as human shields. They're shooting from behind them in order to maximize the number of civilians they kill on our side. We, by contrast, are taking superhuman efforts to minimize the civilian casualties on their side. We have this computer that generates tens of thousands of phone calls to residents of areas that are liable to be targeted, telling them to get out of there. We drop tens of thousands of leaflets. Sometimes civilians are hurt, and we deeply regret it. We're doing our utmost to try to prevent that, but that's the difference between us and them. They're a terrorist group. They're trying to kill our civilians, and they've done a job. They've killed our civilians. We've got more than 150 wounded.
It sounds like the Iron Dome is acting as hoped and as expected in preventing some of that loss of life and injury.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. It's got a 90% success rate. You can watch these missiles being taken out of the sky. And for that, we really owe a great debt of appreciation to America, to the President, to the Congress, who have given a tremendous amount of support to this anti-Iron Dome battery system, which is the first anti-missile defense system in history to actually work in wartime.
How difficult and challenging is it for Israel to be where it is geographically, especially over the last couple of years as we've seen so much unrest, so much transition into different leadership, along with leadership that is very clearly opposed to Israel and its survival? How much more challenging has it gotten in the last couple of years? Well,
it's a tough neighborhood, and sometimes it gets tougher. We see opportunities. If Bashar al-Assad and his regime in Syria falls, that would be a good thing. It would be a huge blow to Iran, a huge blow to Hezbollah. Elsewhere, we see challenges. Hamas remains a terrorist organization dedicated to the destruction of the State of Israel. If you look at its covenant, they want to kill Jews throughout the entire world, not just the Jews in Israel. And there's no sitting down and negotiating with these people. They shoot at us. They've got to know that Israel is going to take all necessary and legitimate measures to defend ourselves. And that's what we're going to do.
Well, you talk about negotiation. There are reports that there is an Israeli official in Cairo now and that there will be ongoing talks or efforts there aimed at a ceasefire. But what assurance do you have at all that the other side of this equation is going to legitimately engage in something that would stop these attacks on Israel?
Well, we can't go back to the situation we had before. We had a terrorist organization that every few days decided to fire several dozen rockets into southern Israel and paralyze the southern part of the country. That is not tolerable. President Obama said today that no country would put up with that. We appreciate him saying that. That is the reality. We're not going back there. We made a huge gesture in 2005. Maybe that sounds like ancient history. 2005, we pulled up 21 communities from Gaza. 9,000 people we yanked out of their homes in order to try to make peace with the Palestinians there. Instead of peace, we got thousands and thousands of rockets fired at us. And again, we're willing to strike a deal that will make sure that situation does not return. But until that happens, we're going to take all those necessary measures to defend ourselves.
But is it possible to have legitimate good faith negotiations with a terrorist group?
Very, very difficult. Very difficult. And understand that whatever arrangements have to be made, you can't trust Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. It's dedicated to killing civilians. That's what it has to do. Obviously, there has to be some type of international component there. But again, I'm gonna start harping on this. We can't go back to what we had before, and we're going to take every measure necessary and legitimate to make sure that situation does not return.
What is the tipping point for Israeli leaders, from the Prime Minister, to decide that it is necessary to move forward with ground war operations?
Well, if Hamas keeps escalating, As I mentioned before, just coming up to the studios now, the sirens were ringing in Tel Aviv. Yesterday, the sirens were ringing in Jerusalem. And listen, it's very personal with us. I got a son who's an infantry officer. I got a daughter who's a teacher in Jerusalem. Our kids' lives are on the line here. And so, of course, what would you do as a parent to defend your children? We're going to do whatever we have to do to defend our kids.
What do you think would be the timeline for making a decision about the ground war, for how long it could last? Any estimation as to worst-case scenario?
Well, obviously, if we actually have to use that type of force, we want to use it in the most efficient way. We're going to do, again, our utmost to avoid civilian casualties. But we're not there yet. And we hope that Hamas will back down, that Hamas will accept arrangements, will ensure that they will never again fire at our population and paralyze the country. And again, we live in a tough neighborhood, but we're a resilient and robust country, and we can handle it.
All right, Ambassador, we appreciate your time, and we will, of course, be monitoring this minute by minute. As you said, it is constantly changing.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.